What I want to do to begin is we need to set a little bit of groundwork. We need to kind of establish what our goals are as we run after these, defining what these relationships are and what our end goal is. And so to do that, I want to just spend a couple minutes defining the relationships that we are part of and that we want to enter into. And the most important relationship, the greatest priority we have, is to have a successful walk with the Lord. Now, some of you are like, all right, this is a dating series. This is a cop-out. Like, you have to say that. Now let's get to the meat of things. But truly, this is the greatest relationship we have. And all other relationships, our friendships, if we're dating, those relationships, eventually marriage, all other relationships, parent-child relationship, everything you can think of, should strengthen and support our relationship with God and feed off of it. Be strengthened and be supported by our relationship with God. And I want to define what this looks like. What is a successful walk with the Lord? The way they did at the Westminster Catechism, they said that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And I like this because it has this work that we're called to do. We're called in act, in attitude, in relationships to glorify God. But then we get to enjoy Him as we do that. We walk in His favor. We walk in His blessing. And that's going to bring great joy into our lives. So that's what we want. And everything else, as we attack all these other seasons of life, we want to know that this is truly our priority. I like when, in referencing sex and relationships and marriage, C.S. Lewis put it this way. He says, "We know the sexual life. We do not know, except in glimpses, the other thing which in heaven will leave no room for it." I want to say that one more time. We know the sexual life. We're able to enter into that here on earth. We do not know, except in glimpses, the other thing which in heaven will leave no room for that former sexual life. There's going to come a time in heaven when we're not going to need that side of things. You know, Jesus mentions in the Gospels, like even having a spouse, that's not going to be a thing in eternity. And so just earlier, we were worshiping God, and I'm really grateful. The Lord was using the band. It was powerful, good worship. And that is just a glimpse of what eternity is going to be like. And that is really our greater focus. You know, they say that Americans spend more time planning their vacations than their retirement. You guys have heard that, right? Spiritually, we do that when we spend more time planning our marriage and daydreaming all these things than the time we're going to spend eternity with God. And it's more important for us to understand, establish, strengthen, and walk in a strong, successful relationship with the Lord. That is infinitely greater than any marriage or relationship we can have. So that's where we want to begin. That's our number one priority, but we're here for a dating relationship. And that's not the only relationship we have. In fact, God created us so we cannot, if we're alone, we're going to get depressed. We're going to struggle. That's why this whole metaverse thing, I'm not too worried about it because people are going to figure out they need real interaction. That's a side tangent. So what about all these other relationships? What's our goal there? Well, let's start with singleness. Successful friendships, rather, are this. Successful friendships are two people who share mutual admiration and loyalty to one another. That's it. If you're a friend with someone else, there's mutual admiration, you like each other, and there's loyalty. You got each other's back. There's no confusion, no gray area, no unfulfilled hopes. We're friends, but if one day maybe sort of, none of that. It's just your friends. Loyalty, admiration. It's just appropriate friendships. And nothing romantic or sexual or anything like that. That's a friendship. Next, we have successful dating relationships. And I want to define this different than the world. I want to say a relationship, it's successful, it's a relationship between a man and a woman, intent of discerning whether they are fit to enter into the covenant of marriage. Now, I define it that way because success, I want to paint two pictures. It's a successful relationship if you get to a point where you realize you are compatible together and you enter into marriage in purity and wisdom. Purity, you've done it the way God's called you to do. Purity sexually, purity emotionally, pure, all that. And wisdom, like you have wise counsel and all that. It is also successful if you get to a point where you recognize we're not compatible and you're able to break up in things, but do so in an amicable way where you both still respect each other and you haven't compromised your purity in the process. You're not likely going to marry the first person you date, right? And so if that's true, then you want to have that relationship and gain that clarity, that understanding. Dating is for clarity. Marriage is for intimacy. We're going to get into that all next week. But you want to arrive at that clarity in such a way that you can then break up and things are good. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be biffles and everything's going to be like you've never, just really good friends. Sometimes that's just not in the cards. But in the very least, I want us to be at a place where you can get there and there's not a wake in a trail behind you. So we have successful friends, successful dating relationships, and then successful marriage. And this is the ultimate goal. This is where we all want to arrive and get to. And I want to define it this way. Successful marriage is a marriage that is based on covenant with God, that makes two people more holy and happier, expands their kingdom influence through each other's support, and raises kids that honor and follow the Lord. That's a heavy definition. You can keep it up there for a little bit. But that's pretty different than the world's definition of marriage. I believe the world's definition of marriage is hedonistic, it's selfish, and it's short-term or short-sighted. Let me explain this. It's hedonistic because the world is like, hey, get married because it answers your emotion and sexual desires. It's just all about answering your needs, which marriage can do, but it's so much more and beyond that. It's selfish because it's all about you. The world's definition of marriage is not a covenant. It has nothing to do with this lifelong, godly contract that has this great balance of loyalty and love. None of that. It's just about what makes you happy. And then it's short-term because it has no eternity in view. It ignores the fact that we have been given just one life to live, but after that, we have eternity. And hopefully, if you know Jesus, eternity with the Lord. And that's a big deal. We're aiming for real, strong marriages. Now, you guys know when marriages break down, community breaks down. Our culture, our nation has seen just the decay of our culture since the 60s. That's when the sexual revolution came in and it redefined how we saw marriage, how we saw gender, how we saw sex. Shortly after that came no-fault divorce. And shortly after that, just issue after issue after issue. And we're seeing now the results of a culture of fatherlessness, a culture where the breakdown of marriage has entered into it. It's infiltrated every aspect of our culture, including many aspects of the church. But when marriage, real, strong, true, godly marriage is lifted up, every aspect of community is blessed and strengthened. And we could see that, unfortunately, since we've been growing up, we can only see that in real pockets here and there. My prayer is that you know at least that blessing from your parents, but that I know many of us don't. So why do I bring this up? Because we want to have clear definitions. We want to have clear aim of where we're going so we can be clear if we're not entering into those things or we're not walking in relationships that are healthy. And I want to spend just a couple more minutes on marriage, and then we're going to move on. But again, if this is where we're going, then it's worth really establishing a healthy foundation, understanding where we want to arrive, where we're headed towards, and then shape everything else based on that. You know, if you're going on a road trip, you need to know your destination. You can't really even start otherwise. You're going to get lost and you're going to waste a lot of gas, which, never mind, it's just expensive. So what are some characteristics of marriage according to the Bible? Well, first, the purpose of marriage is to glorify God. Paul wrote in Ephesians 5, he was talking about marriage. And he said, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And this mystery is great, but I'm speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband." You know, I had to shorten this for the sake of time. I'd encourage you to go back and read that whole chunk of Scripture. But it talks about the example that marriage is, and it's an example of who Jesus is and how he loves us, the church. And in that passage, over and over again, it says, do this as Christ would do it. Do this as shown by Christ and as demonstrated through his love. Over and over again, we see that marriage, it is less and less to do about us, and it's more to do about the picture it paints of who Jesus is and how he loves us sacrificially. And this is why marriage is one of those things that it's a hill that I will die on. It's something that I do not want to redefine, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep it defined the way the Bible does as a covenant between man and woman, is because if we change the definition, we change the picture that it's pointing towards. And what I know is this: when marriages are strong and healthy, people see an example of love in that marriage that hints, that points them towards a greater love in Jesus and what he's done. That's the example. The purpose of marriage, first and foremost, is that we have this opportunity through a union between us coming together with one other person, making this commitment. We have an opportunity to show everybody who Jesus is and how through his strength and his empowering, we can live compatible with one another, in love with one another, happy, and pursuing things bigger than just us. It's about Jesus. Next thing I really want us to know is marriage is to make us holy and not happy. Now, disclaimer, you could be happy in marriage. I'm pretty stoked in mine. I'm the keeper. Like I love my wife. But marriage transforms us. And the reason, again, it's really important for us to establish this foundation. We're going to get into the friend zone in just like 3 minutes. And it's going to start getting, not good. This is good. This is needed because if we approach marriage with this idea that it's about making me happy, then every single one of us are going to be let down. Because you will be happy, but the process is also refining. You're living with another person, and you're a sinner, and they're a sinner, and I'm fallen, and my wife's fallen. And all the time, I want what I want, and she wants what she wants, and we have to selflessly approach each other the way God has called us to, and it's refining. It makes me a better person, whether I like it or not. Thankfully, most people like it. like me being a better person. Marriage is about making us holy. I'm more like Jesus now than I was 10 years ago when I married my wife. And if we, as we run after marriage, as we pursue a relationship like that, if we pursue holiness, we're likely to get happiness. If we pursue happiness, we're likely not to receive that or holiness. Because when we run after God and we do things His way, blessing comes, favor comes. When we run after ourselves, we miss out on a lot. Two more quick things. A characteristic of marriage: why you marry is more important than who you marry. Why you marry is more important than who you marry, because marriage is about glorifying God. It's about making us holy. It's about advancing His kingdom, God's kingdom. Growing up in high school, I kept hearing this thing where my mentor would say, man, you got to find someone that together you can do more for the kingdom of God than you can do separately. I love that. What I found is that eventually became like a byproduct. I got caught up in all these other things I was pursuing, and unfortunately, right? And because of that, it gets messy. But when we, from the very get-go, understand that one of the top reasons God has called us to enter into a union, a covenant with someone else, is to expand His kingdom. He called Adam and Eve together, and His purposes in the garden there were to raise a family, and then they would expand the garden, and then their kids would raise families, which it wasn't weird for brothers and sisters back there. That's another message. But and then they expand the garden, and they would just keep doing that over and over and over again. That was the goal, is that together they could do something that they couldn't do on their own. And together, my wife and I together, man, we make a pretty good team. Not only do we raise kids that are pretty dang cute, and I promise you, I would tell you if they were ugly. I scored. They're great kids, but it goes way beyond that. There's so many times my wife tells me something, gives me a perspective, or challenges me in a loving, respectful way that just helps me do more for the kingdom of God, and vice versa. And there's this verse, I love it. It says, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things, all other things will be given to you, be added to you. And we approach marriage usually without even considering that. But Jesus says if we seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, if we make that the priority, then we're going to be taken care of in all these other ways. But when we make that the priority, we're going to enter into a covenant the way He's called us to, and we're going to do some really incredible kingdom expanding work. Why you marry is more important than who you marry, because if it's all about who you marry, what if they're not they don't have anything to do with the mission? What if actually they hold you back from the mission? I have a few friends who, man, they married really attractive, friendly, wives. Like, they had some things really great, but when it came to their relationship with God, or when it came with their perspective of how to walk in generosity, or walk in selflessness, or walk in a kingdom advancement mentality, all of those things, there were some serious things left to be desired. And so what happened is, over time, their ministry diminished more and more and more. And they went from, I have some friends who wanted to be pastors and wanted to pursue ministry, and they married someone that did not share that. And because of that, they're not doing those things. Girls, it could be the same. right? You can go and you can have like this real desire to raise up a godly family, or to go and be a missionary, or to do some incredible things for the Lord. And if you marry a guy who's a hunk and who's super athletic, but is not willing to pursue Jesus, then the mission is gonna fall short. Dave Hoffman's calling me. Yes. Finally, marriage, last quality, marriage meets our needs, but it goes beyond sex. I had a friend a little bit ago tell me, like, I feel like the marriage is all about just getting people to have sex as quick as possible. Like, within the church, that's what it is. Like, how can we have sex and just like get married as quick as possible? And marriage meets our companionship needs. But if we make it all about sex and not other companionship needs, or if we make it all about sex and not the mission God's called us to do in glorifying His name, then we're gonna run into some trouble. Marriage has to be more about sex, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Not just your sex life isn't gonna be incredible your whole marriage. Usually it's like honeymoon period, and then it just slowly, and then later on, it's about more than that. But when we make it just about that, then the unhealthy attitudes that we bring in, unhealthy expectations we bring into marriage, seem to hurt men, but seem to really hurt ladies. And when we bring in these bad expectations so quickly, something that started out with promise can start to decay or fall apart. What I want us to have is a healthy understanding of what marriage is. And now painting this picture that it's God's bringing together two people in this covenant, this lifelong, sacred, binding contract for His purposes and His kingdom, and to refine us and answer our needs. All of those things all together, knowing that now we could run after that gift in an appropriate manner. So that's a lot. The reason I spend so much time on that is because there's this quote I love. It says, "When you know your why, you can endure anyhow." And if we know our why, we're doing it for those purposes, then if we do it in a different way than the world, or if we do it in a way that's not easy, or if we do it in a way that sometimes we just don't want to, we can endure those setbacks or those challenges or those struggles because we know ultimately we're running after something that is greater than us and that is bigger than us and is going to bring about more blessing than we on our own could ever bring to ourselves. Okay? So that's what we're running after, real God-defined marriage. So how do we do that? Well, what I want to do over the next 3 weeks, tonight and the next 3 weeks, is I want to define the levels of friendships that we have. So this is what it's going to look like. There's the friends. You're just friends, the friend zone. After that, there's dating. Now, dating, you could break into two sections, but I'm going to define one as a figuring out zone. Douglas Wilson calls it the vulnerability zone. And that, I'm going to show you, is a very, very short season. Right after that, so you're friends and you're clearly friends. Then you're dating, you're trying to figure out, are we going to pursue more or are we just going to go back to friends? So you're in that dating, figuring out zone. Then you put a title on it. You make boundaries, boyfriend, girlfriend. That is going to be longer. Then you get engaged, put a ring on it, right? And I'm going to talk about timelines for dating to engagement. I'm going to try to get as practical as possible. And then finally, there's marriage. Bow chicka bow wow. All right? So, my prayer is this, that we could define the boundaries of each, how to conduct ourselves in each season, how to move from one season to the next and sometimes back, and how to get out of each season in a healthy and respectful way. Everyone with me? All right. What is the friend zone? Now, the friend zone in the world defines it as this. I like her, she doesn't like me. I'm in this torturous, painful, and she's oblivious to it all. I want to define the friend zone a little bit differently. I want to define it in a way that I think is good. And it's simply this. It's clear to everyone that you're both friends. That it's clear to everyone. So you don't have anyone saying, hey, are you dating? You two? Are you, do you like each other? Are you dating? How long have you been dating? How many dates have you gone on? When are you going to start dating? Why haven't you asked her out yet? None of that, because there's no I wonder about those two. None of that. It's just clear to everybody you're just friends. It's clear to you and for her or him. It's just clear. I don't like them. They don't like me. We've everything, no ambiguous texts or unclear, going and talking to them for 6 hours or anything like that. Now, why do we need that? Why is that important? It's important because mixed feelings leave people hurt. Now, I'm not going to take examples, but I know a lot of us have been there. I've been there. I've been in a place where it's I really like this person. I don't think they like me. And you're trying to figure it out. Mixed signals leave people hurt. We're really good at saying one thing and hearing another. We're really good at doing something and someone thinks they're flirting and another person is I'm not flirting. I don't mean anything like that. My wife used to call me out on this. This is kind of weird. I would go somewhere with my wife and a waitress would come up and I would interact with her and then the waitress would leave and my wife would say, you were flirting with her. And I'm like, first off, why would I do that? You're my wife and you're right next to me. And my wife would be like, no, you're flirting. What you're doing, the way you're talking to her is flirting. I had no clue. Now, some of you are like, well, you're pretty dense. I get it. We do this. Guys, we do this more than we know. Girls, you do it too. In fact, there's things what you don't know. If you could do an experiment, girls, you could walk into a room and you could touch 6 people, not in a weird way, easy, but just tap their shoulder, do something like this. Every single guy will recognize that you touched them, every single one, and half the girls won't even notice it. Girls don't usually realize that because girls are more touchy-feely. But every single guy recognizes it because, we don't do that. We notice it. And here's a controversial statement. I really believe it. 2 people, especially 2 young single people, boy and a girl, cannot spend a lot of time together without growing feelings for each other. Now, some of you are like, oh, I don't know about that, which means the friend you've been hanging out with a lot likes you. It's true. You cannot, the way we were designed and created, if we spend a lot of time with each other, a boy with a girl and a girl with a boy, one of you eventually, likely both of you eventually, are going to develop feelings. And that's why we need a friend zone. We need things to be clear because mixed feelings leave people hurt. Why else? We need to define the terms because of foothills dating. I need everyone to raise their hand. Every single person. Every person, raise your hand. Now, keep your hand up if you know what foothills dating is. All right, a good amount of people. Now, some of you are new. You're like, I've just arrived at foothills. You have something else. There is awaken dating. There is Shadow Mountain dating. You just fill in your Christian church. This is what it is. You like her. She likes you. You know you like each other. Everyone knows you like each other, but you're not dating. We're not boyfriend and girlfriend, right? We need clear, defined terms in the friend zone because of things like this. Now, here's why we do stuff like this. It's not just foothills, it's Christianity. We have this because we have this unhealthy expectation that once you start dating, you have to start planning your wedding. You guys know this, right? Like, you're Christian, they're Christian, you start dating, and it's like wedding bells are already there, your mother-in-law already has a playlist, and all of this stuff, and that's not even like the crazy lady in the church lobby who wears way too much perfume. She's already made the invites. Like, it's crazy. And so we have to really define these terms because, and here's what happens. You guys like each other. You're not going to take that leap because you're not sure that you're ready to get married yet. But you know you like each other. You still spend a lot of time talking and maybe even go out on dates. But here's the catch. You don't have the title, so you don't have boundaries, and you don't have accountability. Blurred lines hurt people. A lot of girls have gotten pregnant because they were church dating. No boundaries. You like each other. How long does that go? We need to define terms because we talk too much. And by that I mean Joe and Diane walk across the church lobby, and by the time they get to the other side, everybody else is already offended because they didn't get invited to their wedding. That type of talking. We have to define terms because we talk too much, where what happens is you just have expectations that are unrealistic. We have to define terms because our expectations get silly. I'm not going to date anyone because I have to find the perfect specimen of holiness and hotness and financial security. Because once we start dating, it's time to get married, right? Or once there's this like built up, like it has to work because I'm a Christian, they're a Christian, and if we're not compatible, then is there a God? Like what? And then I'm going to have to go back to singleness and all of this. You know, I had a friend who, he asked this girl out on a date, and she said no. And she said no because he had asked her friend out on a date. And so it came off as he was kind of desperate. So I'm like poking the bear a little bit. I want details, like what's going on. And it turns out he asked her friend on a date 9 months earlier. 9 months earlier. Those expectations are crazy. Like, if that's the expectation, if I go out on a date and it doesn't work out, then I can't date anyone else for another year? Well, none of us have hope, like, or anything. Finally, we have to define the terms because we hold on to hurt. We really do. And hurt when, like, not even we're dating and we broke up. That's hard. That's heavy. But we hold on to hurt like, hey, I really like them and they didn't like me. And I don't know why they didn't like me or what's going on. We don't even always know if they knew that you liked them or what, like, but it's just hard. But when we have clear expectations, less people get hurt because you know exactly where you stand with another person. So we want to get to healthy, strong dating relationships, but it begins by us just being friends in a way that's all clear. That way we can clearly step into dating when it's time, when we're ready for it, or remain in our friendships if that's not the path we want to take. So what does that look like practically? Real practically. I'm going to put a slide up there in a second. It seems like a lot. Stay with me. This is how we stay in the friend zone. We have to guard those things. How much time we spend together, what we talk about, where we are and who is with us, what promises we make, and the means by which we talk to each other. Now, all of that is considering a boy and a girl. They're both friends. All right? Now, this is different. Those things, if I'm just hanging out with Anson, it's different, right? I don't have to worry about those things, but there's not really any blurred lines there. You guys with me? Now, to be fair, we live in a day and age where same-sex attraction is something that a lot of people struggle with. And so if that's you, then you do have to approach even same-sex relationships with a little bit more, like a different approach. Now, you still have hope. It's not like I'm telling you you have to be friend zones with everybody always. It just means you need to talk to a counselor or a mentor and work through that. What's appropriate with where you're at. Is that fair? But when it comes to, like, if I'm just hanging out with another dude, we can spend a ton of time together. There's clarity there. But when it comes to me and another girl, we have to be on guard. So I want to give you some examples. My assistant, Katie Jones over here, it's not going to be healthy if we spend 3 hours talking every single day, right? She works for me and stuff, and we have she comes to my office, we have a meeting, windows open, we have it during work hours, things like that. You just have to be on guard so that there's no ambiguity, right? We have to, if I'm talking to Allie Case in the back, I'm married, she's married. Wait, what? Lindsley. Oh, Allie Lindsley. Hey, I officiated their wedding. I should know that. It was a good time. It actually poured during their first dance song. It was cool. But if we're talking, it needs to be really clear that we're friends, right? It needs to be really clear if you're single and they're single, that there's no blurred lines, because blurred lines leave people hurt, mixed feelings, all of that stuff. So what are we going to talk about? Well, not my deep, dark secrets and what I need counseling from and therapy out of and all those things. We're going to keep it pretty topical. We're going to keep it light, because that makes it clear to me and to her and to everybody watching that we're just friends. You guys with me? It could seem legalistic, but remember, if we're running after getting to marriage with the smallest trail of disaster in the wake, right? If we want to get there in the healthiest way possible, we're going to do some things that are a bit different, because what our culture is currently doing is not working. We're going to worry about and be on guard about where we are and who's with us. I'm not going to go hang out with Leah in some private place, right? Or just the two of us. That doesn't work. That blurs the lines. It complicates things. I'm going to be wary about what promises you make. You don't make promises with your friend like, hey, I will always be there for you. And I will never let someone hurt you in that way. Like, you could be loyal and stuff like that, but if you start making vows and promises, that's a big deal. That can blur some lines. Finally, we want to be weary of the means by which we talk to each other. What I mean by this is the most public ways of communication possible. Now, even texting is pretty private. And I'm not going to text Katie 80 times a day. I don't know, I probably text you like maybe 2 times, if that, right? But even that, there's a record. I'm not going on some weird app, DMing, or I'm not going on Snapchat where something's going to disappear quickly. I'm going to leave everything out in the open as clear as possible. Why? Because what is the friend zone? I'm friends, you're friends, and everybody knows we're friends. When that is clear, then the fewest amount of people get hurt as possible, and it leaves you at a really healthy and strong place to move out of the friend zone. Here's what else it does. I'm married. If I have these blurred lines with girls and I'm married, that adds a whole nother layer of complication, right? So we need friend zones if you're single and they're single. We need friend zones if you're single and they're not. Because you want to leave we want successful, healthy relationships. Cool, everyone with me? Because I'm going to wrap up. Here's what we're going to do. I want to talk about singleness for a quick moment. Next week, we're going to talk about getting out of the friend zone. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about training camp, because what you do when there's levels. There's training camp, and then there's the tryout, and then there's you made the team. right? Training camp is all the prep work to get out of the friend zone. Like, what do you need to do? Just work on yourself. The tryout is that vulnerability zone, like, hey, is this going to work out? And then if you're dating, that's like you made the team, all right? I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to break down some real practical ways to ask each other on dates and what type of dates to go on in ways that are healthy and strong. But some of you are single, and you are really anxious to not be single. It's easy in our culture to view singleness as this like plague, and marriage is the antidote. And right now, you have a whole bunch of issues, and there's this problem, and this problem, and this problem, and just as soon as I get married, man, all these things are going to be taken care of. I don't have to worry about loneliness or lust or you name it. Like, it's a cure-all. And that's not what marriage is. And that also means, if we have that attitude, it means we're often missing out on a lot of blessing that singleness brings. I don't want to be single ever again. What it means to me to be single is either my wife dies or I die, right? So I don't want to be single ever again. When I was single, I did some really cool stuff for the kingdom of God. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. I worked one time 6 nights a week, I was here all the time, and it was good. I was fine with it. It might have been slightly unhealthy, but not as bad as it sounds. There's blessing in singleness. But if we get so wrapped up in I got to get out of it, then we do 2 things. We miss out on the blessings that singleness can bring, but then we bring into a relationship a lot of expectations on that person and on that relationship that are not healthy. So if you're single tonight, a lot of you are, my prayer is that you will soon be in a healthy relationship, dating relationship. And my prayer is that you will sometime in the next, I'm going to say decade to give myself, some leeway, be in a healthy, strong marriage. And next week, we're going to practically go over what that looks like. But for the next week, don't get caught up just wishing you were there. Ask the Lord how he can use and bless the time in the season you're in now. All right, and what you could do now to bless your future relationships. Cool? All right. Will you guys stand up? And can I have the band up? Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you so much that you have made us this way. It really is a blessing. But Lord, it's a complicated blessing. And that's because we too often complicate it. Lord, you've placed before us gifts. You've placed before us relationships and just times in our lives that we really get to look forward to. But God, we want to arrive at those destinations in your timing and by your ways, following the path that you've laid ahead of us. Help us do that. And as we approach these relationships, as we approach talking about it, Lord, may you be honored and lifted high.